All right, welcome back, Chelsea fans, to another episode of the London is Blue podcast. That is right. We are back with a Matt Law special. Matt Law, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you. Been busy, just the way I like it.
Yeah, just nothing going on. Obviously, start of the Premier League season, very, very dull and boring. What are you mostly working on these days?
I've been doing a lot of West Ham lately.
Ugh.
Old favourite of Chelsea fans, Graham Potter, and his future has slightly dominated my news agenda. But I have been covering Chelsea as well with the Champions League and everything else, and keeping on top of that. But yeah, the West Ham situation with Potter and protests has been keeping me quite busy.
How was the trip to Munich? Did you get any good beers while you were there?
I got some good beers. I did get some good beers. I didn't find a sort of fringe Oktoberfest event, which I was a little bit disappointed in.
Oh man.
But we did get some good beers the night before the game, and I might have even had a cheeky beer the day of the game. So yeah,
Wow,
all good.
there it is, as the Germans do. Look, we have quite a bit to talk about in this one, particularly around Chelsea's form. We'll talk a little bit of the business of Chelsea in section 2, and then of course round out with some fun mailbag questions to do this one up. So, Matt, we have sad news for everybody.
This is the big news, to be fair. Forget Chelsea's form. This is the big news.
The man we knew and counted on as Mattstradamus has lost his magic prediction touch, and now Chelsea are just a thin, inexperienced squad, and everything's kind of down. So tell us what the hell happened.
I was going to argue after the Brentford game when they lost at Bayern Munich, I was going to argue that it was just a blip, and that had my Man United draw prediction came off, that I was still going to claim the title. But the Brentford and the Man United games going wrong for my predictions. I'm going to have to accept defeat. It's all over. It is all over.
Yeah, it does. It does kind of feel that way. I mean, since we last talked, Chelsea have a pretty bad result at 17th place. Brentford, they were struggling at the time. Chelsea able to, I think, muster a semi-positive performance at Bayern. Second half obviously goes pretty poorly. There's some silly mistakes in that one, and of course Bayern will make you pay if you have those. The absolute calamity at Old Trafford over the weekend, which was just compounded error after compounded error, and then maybe most worrying of all, the performance against Lincoln on Tuesday, which is silly and odd and difficult. So take your pick. What's the match in there that kind of gives you the most concern?
I'm gonna disagree on Lincoln. I completely disregard Lincoln. I just think that was a night for getting through. Who cares? Okay. Rest some players, come through with no injuries. That's my view on Lincoln. I don't really want to dwell on Lincoln because I don't see it as being particularly important either way, to be honest with you. The other three are a worry, and my biggest takeaway from the other three, and I agree with you on Bayern, I actually thought Chelsea played okay, and particularly in parts in Bayern, and they sort of shot themselves in the foot. But I thought there was encouragement in that game. But across the three games, as a package, Maresca got a lot wrong. Mm-hmm. And he's had a bad week or so over the course of those games. You know, he rotated in the Brentford game with the eye on the Champions League game. Now, when you do that, you need to win one of the games, is my view. To win none of them and to also then lose against Man United, that's blown up in his face. Mm-hmm. And look, we can argue till the cows come home about what he should have done, and it's great captain hindsight behaviour. But what isn't captain hindsight behaviour is that whatever he did didn't work. He got his rotation wrong for the Brentford game because they didn't win that match. It didn't help him for the Bayern match. And then they're in a sort of negative momentum going into that Man United game, and it becomes an absolute calamity. And he made bad decisions. I didn't think he made any bad decisions, particularly in the Bayern game. I can't think of one off the top of my head. But he made...
I think people complain the subs didn't come early enough to counteract some of the second half
Okay.
lull, but whatever. I mean,
I'm not putting that defeat on him because stupid mistakes are stupid mistakes, and managers can't really do a lot about silly mistakes. But the Man United game, his substitutions and it felt like he rage quit the game early in the game. It was like watching my kids flip over the Monopoly table early in the game. If I've bought Mayfair and Park Lane. I hope that translates for American viewers, but the
yeah,
two expensive ones. Um, it was like watching a kid just flip the table over and right, that's it, I'm off. That's what it felt like. And then lo and behold, United have a player sent off. Casemiro gets himself sent off, and Maresca's left them it much more difficult than it should have been because of his substitutions. It made no sense to me whatsoever. I suspect it won't have gone down well internally at Chelsea either. Watching that and watching the way he dealt with that. Managers make mistakes, and managers hopefully learn from them. I hope he's learned from that week, because that's his first Champions League week as a head coach, and it went pretty badly. And he needs to react to that and show that he's learned from it. And it doesn't have to be. It can be something that we all look back on and say that was a moment where we saw that Maresca learned something, because there was a hell of a lot to learn from it.
yeah. I mean, your point about this being his first ever Champions League week is, I mean, that's a tough week.
Yeah.
3 successive, road games. You're in this, environment in Manchester that, I don't know. It did feel intense in there on TV. It felt like there's a lot of anxiety, obviously, at that club right now
Well, look,
for
it's
a lot of
a
different
night. I
things.
think going away to any stadium when it's a night game and it goes under the lights is always a bit tougher. The
Mhm.
atmospheres are generally better. It's stupid to talk about weather and sport, but the weather just brought the extra calamity feel to the game.
It sure did. Yeah, it really did.
And yeah, it was just such a bizarre first 20 minutes, half an hour, where the whole game was sort of boiled down into. And I've got to say, Maresca just seemed to lose his head. He just whether the pressure of what had happened at Brentford and Bayern, and he goes into that game thinking, I need this one to go right, or what, I don't know, but he just lost his head. I mean, the
Yeah,
one player I would leave on up front if I'm going down to 10 men is Pedro Neto, because the amount of energy and effort Pedro Neto has, and his ability to basically just run around everywhere and sort of play a variety of positions through a match. He can play on both wings, he can play through the middle. Like I say, he's a ball of energy, and he's got that pace on the break. And you're going to, 10 men, naturally, you're going to end up playing quite a low block. And if you are going to create anything, it's going to be on the break. So even before United go down to 10, taking Pedro Neto off without an injury just made zero sense, in my opinion. And then it was compounded by, obviously, Cole and then Casemiro. But I mean, it just got worse and worse.
I look at Maresca, and there was a point last season, obviously before the upswing at the end, where I felt the pressure was getting to him, and he looked like he needed a vacation more than anyone in the world.
Yeah.
Just something to, like, get out of the
Yeah.
headspace that he was in, and just be anywhere else for a minute. And the October international break is not far away.
Yeah.
It's only 3 matches away, but those 3 matches are, I think, a more difficult run of fixtures than what he just went through, and I will explain why. We have a better than expected Brighton, I think, for the season where they are. I mean, they've obviously drawn City, drawn Spurs already. Maybe had some other
Well, they
dodgy
beat
results.
City. They beat City.
Yes, they beat City. Yeah, 2-1.
Yeah.
They have a now ridiculous Mourinho return with Benfica that's just come up over the last like 5 days, obviously officially announced. And then seemingly unbeatable Liverpool, who just keep winning despite, maybe not playing, the
Yeah.
standard of
Yeah. Yeah.
football
Yeah.
that we've seen from them in the past. I mean, I am not one of these people at this stage in any season that is like, man, is the manager in trouble? But like this does present a I think a more difficult week than he just had. Do you agree?
Um, sort of. It could be. It has the promise to be. I never know what to make of Brighton. Brighton are the hardest team to predict in the
Probably, yeah.
league ever. Like one week they'll beat Man City, and the next week they'll lose to Burnley or something. Do you know what I mean? They are so difficult to predict, and you don't know what you're going to get. But that makes them a really tricky opponent because there will be days where they could come to Stamford Bridge if they're in the right mood and not play Chelsea off the park. Chelsea are too good to be played off the park at home, but really, really give them a very difficult game and perhaps surprise them. And they obviously went ahead very quickly last season. Then it turned into a chaotic game, and Cole took over. But they have that in them, which makes them a very dangerous opponent. But on the flip side, you can get them sometimes, and they're terrible. Like they're so difficult to predict, which makes it hard to give a considered view of the strength of these three games. Benfica, before Jose came back, you looked at it as a walkover, to be honest with you. They've not a great team. They've been going through a bad time, but then all of a sudden, chuck Jose into the mix and everything that brings with it, and you
pure narrative. It's just
exactly.
Narrative.
You just think of the sort of the script of it all. The script that's there, and that worries you a little bit. And then Liverpool come in. I mean, Enzo's already waved the white flag to Liverpool. He's already told everyone this week that Liverpool will win the title, and there's no point any of us trying to win the title against them. I worry for Enzo at the moment. I don't worry because I think he's about to get sacked or that he should get sacked. I've been quite positive about him generally. I think he's generally over his Chelsea times done a good job. And I think last season was a successful season for him. And I think he came through a lot of challenges very well. And he learned from things. He worries me at the moment more in his messaging because everything he says at the moment, he seems to be taking a dig. He can't let the defender thing go. And I get it's annoying for him and he wants to rest defenders and da-da-da-da-da. I mean, he does have a defender who he's not even allowing to eat with the rest of the squad at the moment or train with the team. And I know no one wants to see him as a first choice, but I'm sure Axel Disasi could play at Lincoln were needed. I seem to remember Chilwell playing in an early Carabao Cup game this time last season. So I took his thing about him having to play in defence with a little bit of pinch of salt. But everything's a dig. Everything's a dig. It's the defence. It's Liverpool's recruitment. It's Liverpool have won the league. It's this, it's that. It's the kind of I seem to remember digs about the whole striker thing as well. And it's like, what are you fighting? Like, why are you trying to pick fights? Like, what are you fighting against? You're clearly frustrated and angry. And lots of managers get like this when the transfer window is open. You talk to lots of clubs and they'll talk about their managers and coaches just going a little bit mad while the transfer window's open. And I get that because you're trying to force the club to do things. You're trying to get things done. You're trying to get players out the door. Everything's very stressful. Once the transfer window shuts, I always think the good managers, the really good managers, those stresses and strains are kept under wraps at that point, and you focus on the football. And it just doesn't feel like he's fully there. He's just, like I say, I worry about his messaging and I worry about him at the moment. He seems more intent on making points and picking fights than finding solutions or maybe even looking at himself. And this comes from me, who I want to make it clear. I would say, if you were to say, oh, you're anti-Maresca, no, I would say if anything, I've been pro-Maresca. I've looked for the positives in Maresca all through the bad run of last season and when he came through that bad run. And what that bad run does tell me is maybe he will learn from his bad week that he's just had, and hopefully he gets his head together in terms of his messaging as well, because he needs to, because we've seen it as well. Owners don't stand for this. You know, we've seen it with Nuno at Forest. We've seen it with Ange a little bit more, in a little bit of a different way at Tottenham last season. Owners these days just do not stand for it. They don't stand just managers and coaches taking pop after pop after pop at them.
Yeah, and I think the interesting part is your point about like, why now? Like, Yeah,
nothing's going to happen.
you
You can't influence it.
you had the longest transfer window in modern history to do a lot of that influencing if you were really that like concerned and upset. And like obviously the Colwell thing, I think really is the thing that
Yeah,
is probably eating him alive right now. But there are other injuries as well that he's dealing with. I mean, obviously the Asugo injury screws up the midfield balance,
yeah.
especially with Lavia just kind of on a very tenuous
They've
track
been
back,
careful with him. Yeah,
right? The Delap injury screws everything up
yeah,
top because
yeah,
Joao Pedro was looking pretty good at 10, maybe it's finding it a little bit more difficult up top by himself. The Cole Palmer injury feels like an avoidable one that's been going on for a long time that now might be a little bit more serious. And that throws a lot of stuff up in the wind if he's out for any extended period of time. There's not been any confirmation to my knowledge on Wednesday, September 24th, that he's out for any extended period of time, but that's a big one. Batty Shield in defense obviously could help with the rotation, even if he's not everyone's like cup of tea, I guess. And he has players that I think genuinely look worse for wear right now, which is, you mentioned Pedro Neto being an endless bag of energy. I'm going to disagree with you a little bit. He looks tired.
yeah. I mean his general play
Sure,
normally, but yeah,
of
I
course.
take your point on that. I mean, a lot of them look tired. Actually, Enzo Fernandez has looked tired this season as well.
Enzo, Caicedo,
Yeah,
Joao Pedro, Wes, Reese, Kukurev. None of these players, Reese probably is the best of them right now, but I think because he was managed so effectively last season, didn't have all the miles on the tires that everyone else had. This is a pretty banged up unit right now.
yeah, and I think if Enzo came out and talked about that, that's fine. Like I've got no problem with him talking about pointing out that they do have injuries, that they have had bad luck. The timing of Delap's injury was clearly very bad luck right at
Mhm,
the end of a transfer window again. The Colwell injury, the dynamic that leaves him with the defense. I have sympathy for it all. And
mhm.
him talking about that is fine. And I don't think it would cause any problems whatsoever. It might get a little bit of mocking from rival fans about excuses, but he doesn't need to worry about that, and nor do Chelsea fans. But he doesn't need to deal with it in the way he's dealing with it. He doesn't need to be putting himself up against, seemingly putting himself up against the sporting directors and the ownership. It's madness, quite frankly. It's suicidal, and like we've just discussed, you can talk about the situation you're in and how difficult that makes things. But taking these little pops is mad because you can't change anything now. They can't bring in a defender now. They can't bring in a striker now. You're not gonna get what you want now. So you may as well do the best to deal with it. And opening people's eyes to the issues is fine because managers need to do that because at the end of the day, if results aren't perfect, you need to be able to give some context to them. But the way he's doing it worries me.
Well, it's also to me like most football fans in the modern age have access to the same sorts of information, or at least the eye test that we're seeing on the field. Like if he has to run out the same center back pairing and they make more mistakes than they did last year, and people are understanding that there's probably some fatigue, there's probably
Yeah.
the fact they're missing their best center back in the mix or whatever the thing is. I think there's like a general understanding from the fans at least to go, I get this a little bit more than if Levi Colwell and Trev Chalaba, the preferred center back
Yeah.
partnership, were in there
Of
and
course.
they were making just a ton more mistakes off whatever. I think the question that I have though is around the squad and your concern around the squad, because Paul Merson, who I think is a pretty great observer of things, especially around Chelsea, who I think he pays a keen attention to Chelsea, isn't one
He's
of
a
these.
Chelsea fan.
Yeah,
He's a Chelsea
he's not a
supporter.
he's not a fear monger though.
Yeah.
Like I think he's generally one of these people that's just like, all right, here's what I see. He said it changed at Chelsea. As long as they get into the top four, play Champions League, I still see them among the top five. I see them finishing around third, fourth, fifth. At the moment, they aren't building a squad to win the Premier League. After all the context that I just said about the injuries and the players that are clearly not fit to their standards yet, Matt, like what's your level of concern with this squad and the way it's been constructed?
Um, I don't have a huge. Look, there are gaps for me that we've talked about before. The
Sure.
goalkeeper being one. I would have, you know, certainly when the Colwell injury went down, and even maybe before that, looked at another central defender. So there are gaps, and we've spoken about where I feel there are gaps, and people can agree or disagree. But I'm not concerned about. I still think it's a very good squad. I think it's always going to look. I'll bang on about it, and people got annoyed with an article I wrote yesterday about the Club World Cup. But I'll bang on about the Club World Cup. The Club World Cup is going to cause them problems and is causing them problems. And I think they were braced for early season problems. So again, Maresca has that out within internally, because I'm told internally there was recognition that there might be some turbulence at the start of this season. That word was used to me, turbulence. That
Ooh,
the turbulence as in performances, not behind the scenes. Yeah.
No, I mean, terrible though, right? I mean, it's not the word you want to use to start a year.
No, but they were braced for the possibility of turbulence when they've just come off a Club World Cup and 2 weeks of preparation. They were braced for the fact they could get injuries. They were braced for the fact that results might not be quite what you'd normally expect, and that's been the case. So I think internally he would have sympathy over all that. In terms of what Paul says, I agree and disagree. So I don't think the squad is being built to win the Premier League now. So if you're saying to me, are they building a squad that can win the Premier League this season, then I would agree with Paul and say, no, I don't think they are, because if you look at their philosophy and you look at the way they're doing things, it's not a now project. I do think they are building a squad towards winning the Premier League and winning trophies, but it's something they're trying to get to with progress and get to with time. And their belief is that will give something longer lasting. Their belief is they could try and build a squad to win the Premier League this minute that would have a better chance probably of winning the Premier League, say this season. But they don't believe that would necessarily set them up well for the future. What they're trying to do is build a winning squad, which probably won't win immediately in terms of the very biggest prizes, but they hope that by the time it gets to a stage where it does win, that it's set up to win and win and win and win. And only really time will tell whether that's right or wrong. It's kind of impossible to judge it. So I totally understand where Paul's coming from. And I've got respect for Paul. I've interviewed him in the past. I really like him. Amazing Villa player. But I also see that there is a longer term picture in this and a bigger term picture. Just because they're not necessarily doing the things to win the biggest prizes now doesn't mean they're not doing things to win. I hope that makes sense.
It does. I mean, I think the difficulty that people have in the interim is that I would say the lack of championship experience in the squad is a feature, not a bug, right? It's by design. And
yeah, for sure.
And I think that is as you look at the long story here, which, again, I think you're right. You're going to have to judge this over whatever period and however many titles and figure out if that math works for you or not. Right. But it does kind of seem like 2 steps forward, 1 step back at times. Right.
I mean, that is what you're going to get with their project, because with youth, I'm not going to say the word inexperience because I always get a ton of annoying messages from people, but with youth, you are going to get 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and then maybe take a bigger leap forward, take a little step back, and do a little. That's kind of how it works with young players and young footballers. What I would say, my personal opinion on this is, and I'm not a Chelsea fan, so it's very hard for me to ingrain myself into a Chelsea fan's eye on this. And I wouldn't want to tell fans how to feel. I wouldn't want to pretend I know how they feel. This is me as an outsider who watches a lot of Chelsea and is privy to Chelsea information. My thing with Chelsea is I can be satisfied, shall we say, with the way the project is going, as long as there's progress. So last season, there was progress on the season before. There had to be. But so you're looking for in my eyes, you're looking for progress this season. As long as they keep progressing, particularly at the stage they're at where they have actually got relatively high up again, then you'll get closer and closer. If the progress stops, or if it actually over a longer spell in terms of a whole season drops back, because you'll have dips within a season, but if over a whole season it drops back, that's the moment, again, I think you can maybe put a bit more of a critical eye on it. But at the moment, in terms of getting where they want to get to, I think it is about seeing whether there's progress made, really.
Yeah, and just to kind of close off on the options moving forward, CFC Central did ask about the Maresca public vocal frustration at the lack of activities for center backs in the window. So I just wanted to cover that off. And then, look, two bad goalkeeper displays in a row. Robert Sanchez, obviously, with a cataclysmic error. Dogzo in the 5th minute is just a tough way to live if you're any manager. And then Philip Jorgensen's display against Lincoln was troubling for a lot of fans. And I think because both of these players are good at different things, it did paint a pretty contrasting picture, I guess, because Jorgensen has never caught a cross in his life, and that's what Robert Sanchez does with great regularity. I guess, Merson also just comes back in the same interview and says no club has ever won anything without a top goalkeeper. It's very rare. You never look at the clubs that win things anywhere in Europe and say that goalkeeper is the weak link. That never happens. Chelsea have a model they stick to. If there's no profit in the player, they won't be bought. They buy young and at the right market value. That doesn't really work for a goalkeeper. Thoughts on that one?
I agree with it. I agree. I've said many times about the goalkeeper situation. I think Robert Sanchez has improved, and I think he had a good end to last season. And actually, until the Man United game, I thought he'd had a good start to this season, actually. Good. Was it Fulham? He had a very good performance, or Palace? One of those matches, I thought he played
Palace.
very well.
Palace. He was very good. Yep.
Yeah, and I actually thought even though he conceded 3 against Bayern, I actually thought he was quite good against Bayern, because I was interested to see how he handled the Champions League.
Faced a hell of a lot of shots too. I mean,
faced a lot of shots, and his distribution was good in that game, actually. Because I was really looking at that in the atmosphere.
First half was good. Second half was like,
okay, it's okay. Maybe I was writing more of my report in the second half and didn't notice as much. Look, you can't have a goalkeeper who's going to lose you games. Like, you need a goalkeeper who's going to win you a handful of points, 5 or 6 points a season, and you certainly can't have a goalkeeper who's literally going to lose you games. And he's whatever said, and he put out a good statement, I thought. Or did he put something out on Instagram or social media? He took responsibility for it, because he did lose them that game, and it was rash. And we've seen him be rash before. Like, there was one at Anfield against Liverpool where he was very rash, a bit like that, and he can seem to do this. And however much he's improved, which I think he has, and I actually think he is a good goalkeeper. He's not a terrible. I will argue with people that he's not a terrible goalkeeper. He's not even an average goalkeeper. He's a good goalkeeper, but he's not a top goalkeeper, and I don't think he ever will be. And I make Merson right. I mean, whether someone can message in and give me an example, but I've been through this before, and you just go through the title-winning teams, and they've got goalkeepers you'd always rate as being within the top sort of 2 to 3 goalkeepers of the competition. Everyone goes on about PSG winning the Champions League last season and their style of football. Donnarumma, whatever you think of him generally, Donnarumma in that Champions League run for PSG last season was astounding. He was absolutely astonishing. At Anfield against Liverpool, he was unbelievable. Against Villa, he was unbelievable. He did as much as any of their pretty players or the incredible moves that Luis Enrique puts together and everything. And that's always the same for the Premier League winners as well. The goalkeeper's always the best or the second best goalkeeper, always. And Sanchez is like I say, I think he's a good goalkeeper, but he's a level below that, and he's not going to get there.
The last time Chelsea,
sorry,
I was just going to say, the last time Chelsea won the Premier League was with a top goalkeeper.
Courtois. Yeah, exactly. And, Courtois went and won loads of Champions Leagues with Real Madrid. Obviously, the other goalkeeper that Chelsea won the league with was an absolute legendary goalkeeper. I would argue the best goalkeeper in Premier League history. So
I would also argue that.
So look, if they're going to get to where they want to get to, they will have to find themselves a top goalkeeper. I also make Merson right that these days, and it didn't always used to be the case, because look how Chelsea got Cech, but these days it's hard to think of an example of a club going out and getting a top goalkeeper sort of undervalue or from nowhere. and surprising everybody. You know, everybody knew about Alisson. Ederson, possibly, I suspect within the game, they paid a hell of a lot of money. Well, yeah, they paid a hell of a lot of money for Ederson at the time. He wasn't as well known to me, but Alisson was well known to everybody. I mean, Chelsea had been trying to sign Alisson to take over from Courtois, if I get my dates right.
It seems to me that either it's the goalkeeper market is not as inflated as other positional markets, but it's either you get someone at the very top of the bracket for valuation that is a proven talent, or it's someone under valuation but a very specific system fit.
Yeah,
and I think like that those are the things. And the case of Kepa, you got it both. You got a way inflated value, and you got a hypothetically a system fit. And so it's, again, I'm not a goalkeeper expert. I'll leave that to other people. But yeah, I mean that question, it kind of leads into this one, Matt, from Blue London 1905. Is goalkeeper back on the table in the market? I make that January, make that next season, whatever you think.
I'd be surprised for January. I don't really think there'll be the options there. I mean, people will always now keep saying about Mike Maignan. I'd be surprised for January, but to be honest with you, it's hard to say that with any authority at the moment. It's early days, and if Sanchez has a number of bad moments before January that looks like it's going to cost Chelsea, then they will go in for one, because they will try and maximise their season. But I'd struggle to see them getting the level of goalkeeper you really like them to get in January. I mean, look, just to go back to the point, look what Man City did this summer. Man City had a dip season last season, and Pep's obviously been racking his brains about how to get them going again, and we'll see whether he has. But he's bought two goalkeepers. He's completely changed his goalkeeping position. He's obviously, apart from everything else that's going on, and every way you think City are able to dominate football matches through their football or goal scoring or everything, he's completely rehauled his goalkeeping position. On the one season out of the last 5, they haven't won the Premier League title. His reaction to not winning the Premier League is to overhaul his goalkeeping. And if you remember, the first thing he did before he started winning the Premier League was overhaul his goalkeeper. So I think that there's proof in the pudding there.
Yeah. Also, just to note that Mike Penders is having a very nice start to life at Strasbourg, and it seems to be doing pretty well. And I think that's a clear pathway they want to keep open.
We've talked about this. They definitely want to keep the Penders pathway open. And they definitely do have thoughts that within the next 2 to 3 years, even maybe sooner if he has a good season this season, that he is going to be the number one, and that they believe he will be right at the top of the game. It's impossible for me to judge whether, but it's right. It's right to say that is their belief, and everything they do around goalkeepers will be done with Penders in mind. It's a great point to bring him up, because I'd forgotten that.
All right, well, let's move on to segment 2 here, because there is a lot going on in the business of Chelsea. Before we dive into these specifics there, I do just want to say we have a couple of follow-ups from the last time that you're ready, ready and prepared for. The first one being, is the UEFA punishment just this season, or does it extend past this season?
So there's 2 answers to this. So first of all, in terms of the wage to revenue ratio punishment, that's an agreement for the next 4 years. So basically, Chelsea were around 80 to 90% in terms of their wages to revenue, and they have to get down to closer to 70%. And they've got a 4-year agreement around honouring that. Now, if within those 4 years they don't honour that or don't get close enough. Now, I think within these agreements, there is room for manoeuvre from what I understand. So you don't have to necessarily hit 70% straight away, but you have to show that you're working towards the agreements. So if they don't, then the fine that they receive can get even bigger and can get very big, or they could get sporting sanctions at some point within that as well, i.e. potentially even kicked out of a competition. So that agreement lasts for 4 years. So they've got to demonstrate that they're either getting closer or on the level for 4 years. Otherwise, It's basically like they got a fine and they also have this suspended sentence hanging over them.
That's a huge sporting disadvantage, isn't it, for that period of time?
Well, I actually think that my next answer is the biggest sporting
Oh,
disadvantage.
excellent. Wonderful.
Because the next part of the answer is, if you remember this season, they had to balance their outgoings from their A squad with their income. To register new players, they had to balance it with their outgoings. It had to be the same or have made a profit. They have to do that again next summer to register players in the Champions League. That is the harder one for me. I think they'll be relaxed about the 4 year because they've come to an agreement with UEFA, and their model is to bring the wage bill down from what it has been, and it will have already come down from the last one it was judged on. So I actually think their 4 year agreement with UEFA in terms of the wages to revenue ratio, they will have to watch it, and it's something they've got to be very aware of for the next 4 years. Otherwise, the penalties could be quite big. But I don't think they'll be too worried about that. The one that makes life very difficult for next summer is having to balance the incomings to register into the European squad with the outgoings. And I'll tell you why. And I hate myself for talking about next summer's transfer window already. I mean, I'm massively stitching myself up here, given that I hate talking about transfers out of transfer windows. But if you were to say now who is their biggest sellable asset to help them bring players into next season's squad and the easiest to sell, I would say Nicholas Jackson. But Nicholas Jackson isn't in their Champions League squad this season. So even if they sell Nicholas Jackson, he will not count, because it has to be people who you have to balance it against people who were in your squad. So if they sell Sterling, if they sell Jackson, if they sell Disasi, they're not going to count. So to bring players into a squad next summer, they're going to have to trade again, and it's going to result in players like first team players having to be sold, basically. So I'm very glad to bring you that great news. You look delighted by it all.
I mean, so Chelsea obviously have these punishments. There are other clubs in Europe who have run afoul of UEFA. Do you know if this is a like kind of standard punishment? If other clubs are
Villa basically got. I mean, Villa's an easy one because A, I support them and I know about it, and B, they were punished at the same time as Chelsea for kind of the same thing, but on a slightly smaller, less long-lasting level. So Villa's punishment, I think Villa, like Chelsea, have got a 4 year agreement, so they have to demonstrate that the wage bill is going in the right direction, or that the revenue is coming up enough. Like, you don't actually have to drop your wage bill if you can push the revenue up, because it's a percentage ratio, but you have to get the ratio right. So Villa have the same agreement around the ratio as Chelsea. Villa only had the squad signings restriction for the summer just gone. They don't have it for next summer. Chelsea got a heavier penalty, and part of their heavier penalty was having that for 2 summer transfer windows, so they have it next summer, and I think that's going to make next summer, but assuming they're in the Champions League again, very, very difficult.
Well, always one to bring cheerful news to the show.
You asked me to go and research it. Next time, I'll let you live in sort of bliss, not knowing. Don't ask me to get research things if you don't want the nasty answers.
Oh yeah, and so Chelsea are going to really struggle in this competition for a minute. Techie Tiger, with the add-ons follow-up, can you discuss how the add-ons work?
Yes.
And you know which window the add-on gets applied to, if we sell plus a number.
It's the accounting window when the add-on kicks in. It's actually a very simple answer, and I should have known it from the start. But it became a very one to easily get an answer on. So when the add-on kicks in, whatever accounting window that falls in, whether it be next summer, the summer after that, that will enter your PSR. And so if it's a player you've bought, it may be that in 3 years an add-on gets kicked in, and that add-on will be added onto your PSR calculation. Equally, if it's a player you've sold, 3 years down the line, an add-on kicks in, all of a sudden you'll get a nice little plus on your PSR calculation for that year. It is not calculated at time of transfer. It is at time of add-on becoming applicable.
Excellent. More in the money category here. Chelsea have been formally charged by the FA as of a week and a half ago now.
Yeah.
None of that was really a massive surprise if you've been paying attention at home for all the things that Chelsea have self-reported on over the years from the Abramovich days. Can you discuss the impacts that this will bring to the club and what Chelsea are preparing to do to kind of fight this case?
Well, I mean, the interesting aspect of this all is that Chelsea aren't really fighting any of it. That's where it's a different case to Man City's because it's different charges and allegations. But it's also one of the key differences to City. And this is where Chelsea's argument about the fact they don't feel they should get sporting sanction is that not only have they self-reported this, they've actively encouraged and helped the investigation. They've opened their books, they've done their own internal investigation and passed that on to the FA. They have not fought any of it. They've not employed lawyers to try and stop anything the FA are doing or try and do anything like that. So it's very different to the Man City case from that perspective. Now, Chelsea, they had until after the charges came out, they had until September the 19th to reply or appeal. Then they won't have said anything. Basically, they'll have just notified the FA that to go ahead with the case, because there's not going to be an appeal. You can't really appeal something you've self-reported. So Chelsea hope and believe that will result in a financial penalty rather than sporting sanctions, because A, they've self-reported and helped, and B, it was done under a different ownership. It does go to an independent panel, though. So whilst I would imagine, and this is me guessing, whilst I would imagine that they will have been privy to talks with the FA that will have led them to believe that a financial sanction is more likely, they won't have been told that, and they can't be told that because it is an independent panel who makes the final decision. Now, they do make the final decision on the basis of an FA recommendation usually. However, just to throw a spanner in the works, it was reported that the FA were recommending that Paqueta be banned for life, and the independent panel went completely against supposedly what the FA had recommended. So it can go that the independent panel doesn't do. Now, I think if the independent panel were to sanction Chelsea with sporting sanctions, at that point, I think you might find Chelsea try and appeal it, because I'd imagine they could still go to CAS and things like that.
Right.
They certainly won't appeal a financial penalty, because they're not trying to argue that any of this didn't happen or they shouldn't be punished for it. What they're trying to argue, what they would argue around, is the appropriate punishment.
Fascinating. So this could really still take a couple of turns.
It has potential to, or it could just be really simple. It could be that in a few days we get an announcement that Chelsea have been hit with they got you fined. You know, they made a settlement with UEFA over this for 8 million, which seemed very low to me, but 8 million. If you remember, they withheld £100 million from the actual buying Chelsea to cover for all these things. So we could just one day wake up to find a statement that they have been found guilty and the punishment is some sort of fine, whether it be 8 million, whether it be 15 million, whether 20 million, whatever. That would just pass very quickly. We're at that. If a surprise comes along and all of a sudden the sporting sanctions, whether it be points deduction or a transfer embargo, then it could take a little few twists and turns from there. But it's important for them. And I think you might, in the money section, was going to ask me about front of shirt sponsor.
Well, yes.
I do
Excellent
think,
segue.
Yeah, I do think that this will be impacting the front of shirt sponsor as well, because no company in their right mind who does their due diligence is going to sign a huge contract based on Chelsea being at a certain level, knowing that there's something hanging over their heads that even has the 2% chance of suddenly changing Chelsea's outlook for the next 2, 3, 4 years. So you're not going to get a company sign off on that, I don't think, while this is over their heads.
Do we have a sense of timeline for when this ruling might come down, or is that
No, I
just
mean, what happened is that the only timeline we were given is they had until September the 19th were they to appeal. The expectation, both inside and outside Chelsea, is that it will be done relatively quickly in terms of announcing a sanction after that date, because there is no appeal. So it's not like the thing that usually holds us up is lawyers and appeals and having to pour through it and go through everything. That's not there. So all we're literally waiting on the independent panel to go on is what is before them and what they already know about, and decide what appropriate. So it shouldn't take long. It should certainly, and I hope I'm not proved to regret saying this, it should certainly be this side of Christmas.
all right? Just that's speedy for our English
But Chelsea
colleagues.
want it done. Chelsea have been doing everything they can because they actually want a swift resolution, because they believe that they will get a financial penalty. They want a swift resolution because it will hold other things up. It will,
Totally.
because it's, were it to go, like I say, the however small percentage chance, were it to go wrong for them, it has massive consequences. So it will be holding things up in the background, this.
Yeah, sooner the better. And this is all like, I think this case, the city APT case from a
Yes.
couple weeks ago when we discussed that, and Chelsea's own internal workings. Chelsea do announce a couple days ago a new business team. Todd Klein, now president of commercial, Phil Lynch, chief digital officer, James Murray, promoted to chief operating officer, and all three of these roles report to Jason Gannon, who's been in the main leadership role for a little while now. Also, that Kasper Stylesvig left the club to pursue other opportunities, which I think is always funny. Kasper was, by all intents and purposes, brought in to help with front of shirt. It seems like they keep rotating in this commercial operations capacity. I mean, any insight here as to what might or might not have happened?
I think we've got to be careful legally here,
Fair
because
enough. Yeah.
he has legally, I think I can't write about this either because he has a right to privacy. So I can't speculate over that. What I can say is that at most clubs, a behind the scenes reshuffle among the suits, as it were, is not usually very newsworthy or interesting. But it's become interesting and newsworthy at Chelsea under this ownership because it keeps happening. We keep having reshuffles and we keep having a moving of the deck chairs. We had Jurasek, we've had other people come in and out very quickly for various reasons. And while that happens, it just adds to a feeling of slight instability, particularly when there is no front of shirt sponsor yet. So that's why it becomes, I think, more newsworthy at Chelsea than it would do at most clubs, where I don't think it'd be very interesting at all. Obviously Todd Klein came in. I think his and Kasper's jobs from the outside looks a bit similar, and that they might overlap a lot. Now, whether they were happy to work together, not happy to work together, worked well together, didn't well together, obviously Todd Klein is going to now pick up the majority of it on his own, but he was already working on it. So he was working on it with Kasper. Now he's working on it largely on his own, albeit all the time. I think they're always working on things quite closely, the whole lot of them. So it's not like Kasper goes, oh shit, we've got to start from scratch. He takes all his files out the building. Oh no, we don't know what's going on anymore. We've got to start again. It's not that. So I think it will impact very little in terms of what they've already been doing, who they're already talking to. I feel like it's more to do with the breakdown of responsibility is probably the most I can say.
From Nuggets Galore. So we've had Rye Guy, we've had Techie Tiger, we've had Nuggets Galore in here, which is just a great username. Anything on the stadium that is of note?
I've told you before, I don't think there'll be anything on the stadium until there's something on the owners. And the issue with the owners, let me tell you, is still there. So until we get a resolution on how this ownership ends up, I don't see there being any progress on the stadium whatsoever.
So there was no huge coming together after the Club World Cup win and them deciding to just continue to.
How many people were on the pitch? How many of the owners were on the pitch after the Club World Cup?
Yep, it's a fair enough point. Okay, all right,
leave it there.
We're gonna look. Let's not get ourselves into trouble for asking silly questions. All right, let's get into the final segment here with odds and ends. And you mentioned Raheem Sterling and Axel Disasi earlier,
Yeah.
and so I just thought I'd kind of round back with this one. Had some kind of odd quotes from Maresca last week around their, obviously they're training separately. They're not a part of the first team structure. He goes and says, my father is a 75-year-old. He's been a fisherman for 50 years. That is a hard life, not being a player, the way the work, all that sort of stuff. And I think his point is these are not victims in the circumstances. They train at a good facility. They may not be a part of the structure, but they're being paid a lot of money.
What happens, and it's happened at Chelsea before, because I've covered these stories at Chelsea before, is when players don't train with the first team squad, it's standard practice that the PFA ring
yes.
up and they ring up and they check what's happening, because they have to check that there's still a duty of care being adhered to. And that duty of care basically revolves around giving them ample training, so many training minutes and all that kind of thing, and also making sure that they can play some sort of football, because again, physically you have a duty of care to the player. It's not an investigation. It wasn't an investigation. It's not PFA coming in and slapping Chelsea's wrist. This is just like what happens when players are left out the first team squad. It happens everywhere, and the PFA get involved, and they should do. And so that's good. And Chelsea have obviously demonstrated to them that both players they have physical trainers that they use, that they are given ample training sessions, and they have apparently said that they will have opportunities to play football, albeit not for the first team. So things will be arranged for them to give them some sort of match minutes. So from that perspective, Chelsea really aren't doing. Maresca was right. Chelsea aren't really doing anything that hasn't been done time and time again. I mean, look at the Man United bomb squad. Amorim was doing the exact same thing at Man United. It's been done all over the place for years and years and years. The only thing I didn't like the way he expressed himself, just because I thought it was unnecessarily harsh.
It's kind of flippant,
Flippant. Flippant's a good word. And you just have to be careful with being flippant about stuff like that, because we do live in a world now where we're all a lot more aware of mental health and being careful about people's personalities and just because the sort of notion that because they're footballers and they're not fishermen or they're not cleaners or whatever, that they can't have difficulties going on, which kind of was the implication, is a dangerous one, and I don't like it. So that was my only thing. His actual point about Chelsea aren't doing anything that other clubs haven't doing, perfectly fine. And look, I don't have a player welfare issue with what Chelsea are doing with the players. The only thing I find slightly odd about it is usually this kind of thing happens with players when there's been a behavioural issue. Usually they only really stay in a bomb squad, as it were. Like if you look at United, they would argue that there were behavioural issues with Rashford and Garnacho, who had either missed training or had been late for things or whatever. Maybe there is with Sterling and Disasi, and I don't know about it, but I've heard none of that with Sterling and Disasi in terms of any question marks over their behaviour. That, to me, just makes it slightly different. And also, I did mention it before, when Maresca's moaning about his defenders for a game against Lincoln City, it does look a little bit odd when you have a defender on the payroll who may not be the world's best defender, may not be a defender you want to count on for the season, but could surely play against Lincoln City if only you were to have him around. Don't quite get that. But yeah, I mean, it's going to kill their value. I mean, God knows what happens in terms of trying to get rid of them. But that's the path the club have chosen to go down. But I don't think that Chelsea are acting badly toward them or doing anything untoward. And I don't think there's any investigation or them going to get in trouble with the PFA over it. No.
All right, let's move to a couple of quick rapid fires to round this one out. From James, just James here. Any changes to your predicted top 6 teams now that we are in match week 6?
No, James, I do not change my predictions after 6 games. I would hope that I've done enough of these to make that clear. Ask me in March and I might change. I'm not changing anything before March.
Man of principle. Going down with the ship, huh? That's I respect it.
Whether it's mathematically still possible in March, we'll see. But I'm not changing anything until March.
A couple of Villa questions for you. One from
Right,
Memo.
time to go. See you later.
Yeah. How does he feel about Villa finally scoring a goal? Is Emery washed?
First one was kind of good for about, how long did we keep the lead against 10 men? 10 minutes? It's kind of good for 10 minutes until we went and threw away against the lead against 10 men. There you go. Is Emery washed? No chance. He does need to. Emery will come again. I think he's probably slightly exhausted. I think he needs a bit of freshness around him, and hopefully that's come this week with Monchi going and a new sporting director coming in who he's worked closely with in the past. The Europa League. I said before the season that Villa's season was probably going to rest on the Europa League. The events of the first 5 games of the season have only strengthened that belief. And we start on Thursday night, so it's a big old game at home to Bologna. If we mess that up, then I'm going to start feeling depressed.
All right. Well, that basically answered Clip Show's question with what's going on at Villa. It seems like quite a bit is going on at Villa. A technical journalist question for you,
yes,
from Kyle here, which is, what's the point of the cameras off portion of interviews? Is it just so the writers have something to report that we haven't already heard from the manager?
I love you did give me a sneak peek at some of these questions, and I love this question because there are so many ways to answer this, and my favorite way to express myself on this is going back to Jose's going to come back this week, right? Mm-hmm. And Jose is the king of the press conference, or certainly used to be the king of the press conference. And Jose was brilliant at this because Jose would have a certain message he would put through the cameras that everyone could see, no one could deny. And sometimes it'd be very controversial. It wouldn't be like he'd sanitize himself for the cameras. But then if he had something he said that he didn't want to say on camera that no one could show him that video of, he would wait for the little bit where the cameras go off and we have our written section, which is always called the 10:30 section, the 10:30 section. And he would say it then. And then if anything bad came of it, he could always try denying it on the back of it because there's no actual record of it out there. So some managers still use the broadcast and the written sections a little bit like that. Ange, for instance, has got this reputation of being awful in interviews because he's terrible on broadcast interviews. He clearly hates being filmed. He hates the whole setup of it. I went to Tottenham a lot last season, obviously, and the minute the cameras are off, different guy. Like, very warm, very open, would crack a few jokes. He obviously much preferred the cameras off. The reason for journalists is your guy's right. Basically, it's to protect some copy because obviously Sky Sports News, the invent of basically 24/7 football television and TalkSport radio and things like that, these stuff just goes straight out there. And it would be impossible for us with keyboards to have to write the written word to keep up with that, even if we're not waiting till 10:30 p.m. Yeah. Because they can just literally pump it out. So we're looking for our own material. And also, it's a bit gutting and the European press conferences are different, by the way. They're all just broadcast. They don't have an embargoed section. And it is a bit gutting when you sit there and you ask what you feel is a great question and it gets a great reply and it goes straight on Sky and everyone's talking about it and it's been out for a good 2 or 3 hours before you've even been able to get anywhere near writing it, and it's your question and your response. However, that works both ways. Clearly we take responses from others. So it's just one of those things. I mean, some people like it, some people don't like it. The clever managers use it to their advantage.
All right, last question from EOC here. How much leeway does Maresca have this season if he oversaw, for example, a Champions League group stage elimination and then we dropped out of the Champions League places? Would he be in danger?
I think he'd be sacked for that.
Yeah. Okay. So not much then.
Well, I mean, it'd be hard to argue progress, wouldn't it? I mean, Where's the pro? If you drop out the Champions League at the league phase, that's bad. But then also don't get back in the Champions League for next season. That's like a double failure. And I don't know where you would find any progress. I mean, I don't think that winning the Carabao or the FA Cup would be deemed good enough progress to make up for those two disappointments. So on the basis that I know that the club look for progress each season, unless there were an incredible set of mitigating circumstances, I think in that scenario he'd have to be sacked. I mean, that's a pretty bad scenario.
It's a pretty bad scenario. I think the argument might be, and I say this sheepishly, the Club World Cup and the injuries derailed what would have been a promising season. And he could argue that
like I say, if unless there's a big mitigating circumstance, so if we get to sort of February time or January and the injuries are just getting worse and worse and we have this like incredible injury list, clearly there are circumstances to come in. But just on that, I think he'd be really struggling to hold on to his job at that. You'd have most likely had to finish outside the top 5, not even the top 6. And to finish, what's the to get through the group phase again? Top 24, is it?
Yeah. I mean, it'd be a tough road to finish in the bottom 12, you know?
Yeah. I mean, that is super bad. I can't remember what points tally it was to get there. I mean, by the way, I do think the interesting thing is, and this won't look, I'm not linking this to impacting his job. You've just reminded me of it saying it. So this is aside from Maresca's job, but talking about the Champions League, because we're coming into a Champions League week, I do think the club have got their eyes very much on whether they can get in that top 8, because that top 8 obviously spares you those 2 extra games, which come at a horrible time of the season, right in February when the FA Cup started, when you might still be in the Carabao Cup. You got fixtures everywhere. You've just come through a busy Christmas period. Harry Kane said last season that Bayern Munich, because they found themselves in that horrible playoff round, he said they were the 2 hardest. Do you remember they almost went out to Celtic? He said physically and mentally they were the 2 hardest games of the season because you just did not want them. They were horrible, and you want to avoid that at all costs. Now, last season to make the top 8 was about 15 points. Some people think it might be a bit higher this season because last season was the first incarnation of this phase. Clubs weren't quite sure what they needed or didn't need to get in that top 8. Some big clubs seemed to start slowly, almost as a tactic, and then couldn't get back in. Bayern, Real, obviously Man City, PSG, who won it, which proves you don't have to finish in the top 8 to win it. But I think there is a theory that at least 15 and possibly even more than 15. So that puts a heavy burden on Chelsea's games outside Barcelona at home and Napoli away. It puts a very heavy burden on them.
There it is. It's a good place to wrap as any. But Matt, we appreciate it. We're obviously we have a regular cadence established with you now for a while, but we'll see you in a little bit as we aim to get toward the October international break, which is already upon us. I mean, that's the other part of the season, right? It's just the stop-start nature of.
So, just before we go, this is going to be different next season, isn't it? There's going to be like a 3-week combined. That'll be interesting. Do you prefer one big stop, or do you prefer stop, start, stop, start, stop, start? Who knows?
I do. I prefer the one big. Get out of the way. Just like give us.
Everyone go on holiday. Relax.
Everyone go on holiday. Everyone just like do what you do. Also, that probably provides the women's game a chance to be in the spotlight for an extended period of time too. Like give me the extended break, and then once we're back, and like we can get into a rhythm.
Okay. Well, the rhythm is the thing. I know Liverpool have won every single game. Chelsea haven't. That Liverpool have won every single game. But then still, they're not in a rhythm. No one's really in a rhythm. Performance-wise, everyone's very bitty. Liverpool are just getting over the line in the 96th minute every single week. That's what they're doing. But everyone's bitty. And it will be bitty, I think, until after that November international break, because the calendar has created this. And it's a bit shit.
It is a bit shit indeed.
I'll leave you with that.
The inspiration just dripping off of this podcast is really something. But look, everyone, go thank Matt. We will be back with him after the Liverpool match. So obviously we will have a another window of matches to dive into and to discuss, as we're in the October international break at that point. But plenty more to get through this week. We obviously have the match preview tomorrow, and then we are on YouTube live after Brighton. God only knows what will happen in that, and then we'll be back with a full slate for next week. So, thanks to everyone who listens in for this one, and thank you to Matt for participating. Until next time, keep the blue flag flying high.